Today on BRStv, we're going to blow up the world of Apex. Hi guys, my name is Ryan. Welcome to another week of the BRS 160, where every week we do our best to help you guys, members of the reefing community, enjoy your tanks and find new ways to explore the hobby. We do that by following the setup and progression of this 160-gallon reef tank. Today we're going to share what the Apex is all about, and the big news, the launch of the next generation Neptune Apex that happened this week, followed with who the Apex is for, and share exactly how we'd use this controller on the BRS 160. Neptune has been producing top-performing controllers in the US for decades, so much so that it's been almost impossible for any other brand to even compete in this space, particularly the more advanced, feature-rich end of the controller spectrum. Neptune has really evolved beyond just an aquarium power bar controller to create an entire biosphere for the reef aquarium that goes beyond a simple aquarium with a control pad, monitoring sensors, and controllable outlets. Some of you may be familiar with the term IoT, or Internet of Things, which is a network of devices, physical objects, and other items which have been embedded with programming, sensors, and network connectivity, which allows these objects to collect and exchange data collectively to work better together than as separate entities. The Apex is the aquarium industry's Internet of Things. Everything connected through their cloud-based network called Apex Fusion. This includes their own list of controllable equipment with controllable energy bars, dosing pumps, power heads, automatic feeders, smart dosing containers, moonlight LEDs, and other equipment. However, this IoT isn't proprietary to only products produced by Neptune. They also provide modules which are directly designed to work with the industry's most popular brands like Aqua Illuminations and Ecotech, as well as an Apex-ready platform for other companies to interface with their products directly via hardware or an API where they connect directly to Fusion, which makes almost anything possible. Things as cool as working in conjunction with your home's internet-connected thermostat will likely be possible in the future. The current list of Apex-ready products include things like Kessel's A360 and 160, some of the AI lights, Ecotech's Radion LED, the ZET light, which is growing in popularity, Ecotech's Vortec pumps, MaxSpec Gyre, Tune Streams, and Nano Streams, the Waveline DC pumps, Red Dragon pumps, Seche Extreme pumps, Build My LEDs, and some Rapid and Orphic products. List grows every day. Backing that all up is a list of internet-connected sensors with PAR, light intensity, pH, O or P, salinity, dissolved oxygen, flow rate, moisture or leak sensors, optical or float water level sensors, toggle and magnetic switches, as well as power consumption sensors based on voltage, amps, and watts. Many of these interfaces are future-forward and capable of being used for all kinds of future sensor capabilities. More or less, you can use these sensors, the Apex, and Neptune's cloud-based interface called Fusion to network basically any device or physical object you can think of. Skimmers, pumps, top-offs, lights, heaters, chillers, fans, media reactors, RODI systems, ozone, calcium reactors, dosers, almost anything you can put in the tank, and then allow these objects or pieces of equipment to collectively exchange data with the Apex Fusion, and in some cases each other, to collectively work better together than as separate entities. This is where the Neptune Apex hardware comes in. While Fusion serves as the interface between all this, the Apex hardware is the brains of the tank and where everything is stored and operated from on the tank. This is an important element because if you ever lose internet connectivity, it's not going to impact the tank, mainly just the notification system. There are three versions of the Apex Junior, Apex Classic, which was just made classic with the new release of the next generation of Apex, which was just released this week. Before we get into what's new, let's talk about what you get from the Apex Junior and Classic. With the Apex Junior, you're going to get a 4-outlet controller, a display pad, and a temperature probe for into the 200s. Straight up, this is about double the cost of the 4-outlet controller with temperature probe we covered last week. So what do you get for that extra 100 or so bucks? Well, simply put, you get Fusion, which is that cloud-based connection to your controller, meaning you can set up, monitor, and control your Apex Junior from anywhere that has an internet connection. You can also do this from any device that has a browser, like your PC, Mac, tablet, Android, or iPhone, almost anything. The biggest motivator for most people will be the fact that Fusion will send you alarms via email or text messages anytime something's wrong with the tank. Here's the thing, we're in our homes about half the day where an audible alarm is probably good enough. However, the other half, we're at work, outside doing something fun, or on vacation where an audible alarm is useless. The email and text message alarms will cover you the other half of the time so you can do something about the issue in time or call someone who can. The difference here is similar to a home's alarm that simply makes a noise when it detects a fire or intruder, and one that notifies police and fire immediately of the situation so they can put the fire out or catch the intruder. Outside of that, Fusion also allows you to check out cool graphs, take tank notes, enter your tank's testing parameters, and the programming options span from super simple and intuitive to ultra advanced for those of you that want to do some really unique and fun stuff. Again, the Junior comes with a temp probe and a display, but you can add up to a total of 5 modules, which range from additional outlets to ORP, salinity, switches, pH, leak detectors, PAR level, dissolved oxygen. But where the Apex really separates itself from the pack is the other modules like the automatic feeder, doser, wave power heads, and new things which are always coming like the flow meters, DC return pumps, reactor or ATO feed pumps, and solenoid valves. You can add up to a total of 5 modules with the Apex Junior. Next up is the Apex Classic, which is in the 500s and a significant jump up, but considerably more popular than the Junior because it brings together a package that fits most reefers' needs with their tanks. Starting off with jumping up to 8 outlets on the energy bar, but even more valuable is the energy bar has a slew of built-in ports, a pH probe, ORP probe, 4 variable 0 to 10 volt channels for controlling pumps and lighting, and an IO switch port for the breakout box for float and other open and closed type switches. It also comes with a lab-grade pH probe, and probably the biggest difference is rather than a maximum of 5 additional modules, you can plug in up to a total of 240, which is well beyond pretty much everyone's needs. Last thing I'll mention on the Apex Classic, there historically were 2 versions, one with a standard grade probe and one with a lab grade. They're retiring the standard grade version, and going forward all the Apex Classics will have the lab grade single junction probes. Here's a part many of you have been waiting for. What are the big changes with the next generation of Apex? Well, until now, there was an Apex Gold package, and that's getting retired and replaced with this next generation of Apex. Before we get too deep into this, I want to state that every single module is backwards compatible, so everything you already own is still going to be part of the ongoing Apex system. The next gen Apex has really updated itself on all fronts, including form and function, starting with retiring the old aluminum metal box that housed the outlets and controller and replacing it with the new attractive energy bar and control module. I'm going to start with the energy bar because that's probably the most exciting change. It would appear at first glance that it just has the same 8 outlets. However, it actually has 13 total outlets because it includes 3 one-link outlets, which can be used on a typical array of 2 wave power heads and 1 dual head doser. In addition, they also included 2 more powered outlets they call DC-24s, which can power cool new additions to the Apex line with powered solenoids and controllable DC feed pumps, which will be released soon. Obviously, these 5 additional ports are only valuable if you're using their doser, power heads, or other equipment like this, but many of you are or would, and in this case, it's very likely this change means that a single energy bar covers almost all of your controllable outlets, and there isn't need for more outlets, and most people could probably get away with just a single standard power bar if they need one at all. Now here's the big deal, the energy bar change that changes everything. Each one of the AC outlets now has 7 amp relays, all with individual watt, amp, and voltage monitoring and alarms. What does that mean? Well, for the first time ever, the Apex can now tell you when the equipment has actually failed, meaning when my return pump isn't using power when it should be, it'll set off an alarm and send me an email or text message. This changes the game entirely for the Apex and Aquarium controllers in general. Rather than using a bunch of sensors to detect equipment failure, the energy bar will tell you the exact moment that your skimmer, heater, return pump, lighting, calcium reactor, dosing pump, top off, or basically anything else out there that draws power failed and isn't drawing the power that it was supposed to. This really even goes beyond that because it's very likely you can even detect clogged or damaged pumps because while they're still on, they're very likely drawing less power than normal, meaning you can clean or repair them before they completely fail. This also has obvious energy efficiency applications and likely will help us evaluate performance issues on all kinds of equipment on the tank. With this generation of the Apex system, the brain and the sensor controls are now housed in their own box, and they've expanded its inherent capabilities. Not only are the internal components functionally faster, but they also updated the port system. The new energy bar still has 3 Aquabus ports, the new control module has 2, a port for the breakout box and 6 switch inputs, an Ethernet port, and 4 channels of variable speed 0 to 10 volt outputs. More notably, they added a salinity port, so you don't need a separate module for that any longer. There's an ORP port, pH port, temperature port, and auxiliary power. You'll also note that it's swivel mounted, so you can flip it up to access the ports, and then lower it back down so the cords are coming out of the bottom, which is ideal protection from drips, and not only protecting the Apex, but also goes a long way in preventing fire hazards. The new Apex system also comes with 4 probes: a long life temperature probe, salinity probe, lab grade pH and ORP probe. However, there's been a big change with the pH and ORP probes. They're now lab grade dual junction probes. The second junction protects the internal reference probe and results in longer lasting, more accurate and easier to calibrate probes. All in all, a huge hardware upgrade. They haven't defined the exact details, but there's also going to be some fusion advancements for the new Apex system owners as well. So what else does it include? Well, it finally has a change everyone's been waiting for with an integrated Wi-Fi chip, meaning you can connect the Apex directly to your home's network. No more messing around with Wi-Fi adapters. This is a huge change, which is not only less expensive, but they now have a reliable Wi-Fi standard, which allows for one-touch firmware or Apex operating software upgrades over Wi-Fi. They did take one thing away, which was the display pad, but they did upgrade it so it's much cooler and reduce the price to $99. More or less, almost everyone uses their phone, tablet, or computer's internet browser to monitor the tank and program the Apex. So they felt like replacing that feature with more valuable elements like the monitorable relayed outlets, integrated Wi-Fi, and salinity probe was much more valuable. To be honest, tablets these days have become so inexpensive, I think most people are better off just buying a tablet and mounting it as a permanent, more functional and impressive display for the tank and Apex. This allows for a lot more functionality. Between Apex Fusion and Apex Local, you can do basically anything the display could. And if they're missing anything, I think this direction is a sure signal that you'll be able to do absolutely everything very soon. In relation to that, very shortly they're coming out with an iPhone app, which allows for one-touch access to Fusion and your Apex. I can only imagine Android and tablets will be right behind. A tablet and an Apex app would make for a really awesome display experience. One thing that's really missing without the display is audible and visual alarms. However, you can plug in a flashing light or a buzzer into one of the controllable outlets if audible or visual alarms are an important factor to you. Okay, so who is the Neptune Apex for? Well, there's an obvious price point factor here. Everything we just described is awesome, but it isn't free. The amount you spend on a controller has a pretty close correlation to the overall investment in the tank. For instance, if you have $500 to $1,000 invested in the tank, this might be a bit extreme, but if you have multiple thousands and looking for the best path to a 10-year epic tank, it's a solid investment. Beyond that, the Apex is attractive to a really wide range of experience levels. I don't think anything could be the most advanced, feature-rich, and customizable option, and the easiest, most user-friendly option at the same time, because customization options always come with layers of complexity. But that said, I think the Apex does an awesome job of blending the needs of these two desires well. Most of the setup is pretty easy, and they have pre-configured fields for all the most popular functions with light, pump, heater, chiller, pH controls, ORP control, and feeder. All with super easy to manage fields, and they perform almost all of the most basic functions. Not a whole lot different than some of the easier to use controllers we've mentioned. I will say that this is one area where I think they could expand to cover more specific options, like rather than pH controls, have a configuration wizard for a 2-part dosing pump, Kalkwasser ATO, or calcium reactor. Expanding the configuration options would be a huge step forward in making the product more accessible to a wide range of reefers. So you've all probably heard or seen all kinds of stories of the amazing things people have programmed their Apexes to do. These are your advanced users, and appropriately so, there is an advanced tab where they can program the Apex to do almost anything. It's more or less writing lines of code. So no doubt writing code looks intimidating, however it's not all that hard once you've read the instructions as to what the code means. It's pretty simple stuff like if time 8 to 1700 hours then on, if temp greater than 82 then off. More or less, to do the really advanced stuff, you have to be an advanced user. Just because you bought a 600 horsepower car doesn't make you a race car driver day one, but with a bit of effort you'll smoke everyone around you pretty quick. Luckily, there is a pretty easy workaround to that as well. Almost all of this has been done before 1,000 times. If you Google auto top-off code Apex, not only will you find an example of the exact code you want to use, you'll find an entire thread dedicated to making this more awesome than you ever imagined. There's a thread out there for almost every desire, but if that doesn't work, hit up the Neptune community. Share just what you're looking to do, and a plethora of friendly reefers or a member of the Neptune staff will give you the exact lines of code you need for your exact desires. So you can see why I think they've done a pretty awesome job producing a product spanning the gambit of varying user experience, and almost anyone will be happy with the results if they're willing to put in a mild amount of effort into it. Again, the only thing that I'd personally ask for is more of those pre-configured outlet options based around setting up individual pieces of equipment for the newer reefers. If this is valuable to you, share with a quick comment on their Facebook page, Neptune's forum, or a quick email. Squeaky wheels always get the grease. Okay, so on to how we would use a new Apex system on the BRS-160. We're using a total of 20 of the 22 outlets, as well as 2 of the DC-24 outlets, an ASUS tablet for our display, 3 breakout boxes, an ASM module for PAR monitoring, the ALD module for leak detection, and just for fun, the PM3 for dissolved oxygen. For those new to the Apex, I'm going to run through a couple examples of what the pre-configured outlooks look like so everyone can see how easy these elements are. After that, we're going to share how we would use the Apex to monitor and control all of our equipment. Let's start with a heater. Open up your heater's outlet, name it something like heater 1, select control type heater, fall back off so if the heater is off just in case the energy bar ever gets disconnected from the control module. Under probe name, select TMP, which is a temperature probe on the control module. The other 2 here are additional temp ports on other modules. The on temperature of 77.8 and off of 78 degrees. Then hit the orange upload arrow and I'm done with my heater. Doesn't get much more simple than that. Now I mentioned earlier that the new Apex can monitor power consumption and let you know if the heater has failed before the temperature even begins to drop. To do that from the home screen, hit the small gears icon, then inputs and select heater 1. Note there is a heater 1A and 1W here. That stands for amps or watts. Most people will select watts, so 1W. All you need to do is check the alarm box and upload. The Apex will now notify you if the outlet is not drawing power when it should be. I would note that by default the basic alarm is less than 1 watt or over 840, but you can hit the advanced tab and it will allow you to adjust that. For instance, your 100 watt pump might be only pulling 50 watts if it's clogged or damaged, so you might want to set the alarm at 50, or maybe your skimmer's venturi got clogged and isn't sucking air or at least less than it's designed to. The pump will start to draw 50 watts rather than the 25 it was, so you might want to set the alarm at 40 or so. The list of uses for this are basically endless, and you should really likely turn this on for every single outlet. For me, this awareness that equipment is failing or has failed is a reason to upgrade from the old Apex to their new generation. I'll throw one more outlet example in here with T5 lights. I'll name it T5 back, in this case control type light, fall back off again, on at 9 a.m. and off at 5 p.m. And I want the lights to turn off if the tank is overheating for some reason, so shut down probe TMP, turn off at 82 degrees. I'll leave the hysteresis at 30 minutes, which means once it turns off, it'll stay off for a minimum of 30 minutes, so it doesn't flicker on and off if the tank is right at the edge of 82 degrees. In my opinion, this should just say minimum off time, since very few newer reefers who are using this pre-configured outlet option knows what hysteresis is or how it applies to this configuration. After you hit upload, if you like, you can always switch to control type advanced and see the code that's operating this outlet. This is where all the advanced users are adding all of the super cool things that you've heard about. Again, you can learn the Apex language and write your own advanced code, or you can just do a quick search for what you want to do, because there's likely already at least 100 other threads out there for this very request, or simply ask Neptune's community forum where they'd be glad to help. To achieve our goals with the Apex, every single one of our outlets require advanced custom code. We don't have the time to walk through every last step of setting all these outlets up, but we will share what we want to do and example the code that will very likely achieve that. Keep in mind we haven't had a chance to test every line, and our probes and outlets will have different names than yours, so this is just intended as a general reference to the concept rather than a true guide. We do have 30 or so other how-to videos on the Apex, so those are absolutely worth checking out if you're looking for more detailed how-tos. Our T5 lights are going to take up 2 outlets, T5 front and T5 back. I'm going to want to turn them on at 9 a.m. and off at 5 p.m., which is 1700 hours. I'm going to also want to turn them off if the temperature ever reaches 80 degrees, with a minimum off time of 30 minutes. And I want to use one of the 3 position switches as a physical way to turn them on and off again at will without having to mess around with Fusion. You might have noticed we installed an entire bank of switches. We're going to use the switch ports on the breakout box combined with 3 position switches to allow us to manually toggle between on and the up position. Auto in the center, auto meaning controlled by the Apex programming we write, and off when the switch is in the down position. I personally just really value the ability to walk up and turn some elements of the tank on and off without having to muck about with my phone or display pad. Other than that, we're going to turn on the power monitoring alarm so I know if the ballasts or bulbs have failed. And I haven't decided actually how, but I think I might try and use the PAR meter to monitor the PAR and strength of the bulbs so it can send me a warning to replace them as they age. We might even add some fans to see if we can use the PAR meter to operate the bulbs at the ideal temperatures. There can be as much as 30 to 40% loss when the T5 bulbs are operated both too hot or cold. The Kessil LEDs have their own timer, so I won't bother with that, but I will turn them off if the temperature ever reaches 81 degrees. I have a hard I/O switch to turn them on and off manually, and set up the alarms to let me know if they're not consuming power. The next 4 outlets are all Tunes power heads. You have an option of using the Apex 0 to 10 volt ports to control the DC Tunes power heads, or the controller which comes with the Tunes. If you use the Apex, you'll have to set up both the outlet as well as the variable speed port. Just open the variable speed port and hit the magic wand, which will allow you to create really cool ramping programs for your controllable Tunes pumps. I'm actually going to use the controllers on the Tunes pumps. More or less, I just want them on and connected to feed mode, so I can turn them all off while feeding. And again, turn on the energy consumption alarm so I know if one either failed or is failing. I also have them all set up to the same physical switch so I can turn all of the power heads off with a flick of my finger. With the skimmer, we just want it on most of the time. Again, with a physical switch to turn it on and off, but in this case, also a float switch, which will turn it off if the cup ever gets full. Some reefers might also want a sump level float switch to turn the skimmer off if the water level raises in the sump to prevent the skimmer from going nuts. But most recirculating skimmers, like the Skims model we're using, are not very susceptible to water level changes, so we'll skip that. We'll also add a feed mode to the skimmer as well as a timer to keep it off for an additional hour after the feed mode completes to give the corals adequate time to benefit from the zeolite additives. We'll also set up the power monitoring alarms as well as an alarm based on the float switch to let us know that the skimmer cup is full and needs to be emptied. On the dosers, to be honest, if I had an Apex from the beginning, I would have selected the Dose because it's one of the best dosers on the market and works awesomely with the Apex. However, we're currently using the BRS dosers. I'm going to have them turn on for 25 minutes 3 times a day, and on the alkalinity doser, pH control and an alarm if the pH ever gets over 8.5. I will try to set up power monitoring, but I'm not sure if the dosers will draw enough power to work properly. We'll also install an I/O switch to turn them on and off, in this case primarily off. It's just an easy way to let parameters drop over a few days if they ever get elevated. This is a good time to mention that the 3-way physical switches that do on, auto, and off take up 2 switch ports on your breakout boxes. There's only 6 ports, so you're going to operate 3 switches off of 1 breakout box. However, with something like a doser skimmer, you might only need the auto and off function, and a 2-position switch that only takes up 1 port might be adequate and a good way to save on some switch ports. I have 2 heaters, both will turn on at 77.8 degrees and off at 78. I might set up feed mode B here, which will be a maintenance mode. I might not want the heaters on when I'm draining the sump for a water change. I'll of course turn on the power monitoring alarms for the heaters, which are the #1 killer of tanks out there. This is a huge advancement for them, particularly because reefers often don't notice when just one heater has failed. With our ATO, this is a particularly cool change. I'm going to set up a float as a final backup, which I'll probably swap out to the optical the moment that Neptune starts selling them. Just to give you a glimpse as to why, check out this awesome magnetic bracket they're on the verge of releasing, which incorporates 2 optical eye sensors as well as a float valve for both electronic and mechanical redundancy. For now, we're going to stick with the float until the optical sensor module is released, add salinity controls and leak detection with the ALD, but even cooler than that, we're going to use the float to control the new solenoids they're about to release, and they plug into the DC-24 outlets on the energy bar. You can obviously use these to turn off the water supply based on the float switch, but you can also now regulate how often your RODI system turns on to reduce TDS creep and DI resin consumption if you like. On the roller mat, I'm going to install a high-level switch telling me it's clogged or needs a paper roll change, and on the Zeo reactor and Seni equipment, just have power monitoring and alarms. And I think this charger for the Tune Streams battery backup is just more or less on. Outside of that, I'm just going to set up the lunar lights to be on at night. I just prefer these dim lunar lights over dimming most primary LEDs because they're often too bright, even at 1%. While moonlights do offer a cool nighttime effect, the main reason I use them is so the fish don't get spooked in the complete darkness and jump out. I try and remember to put the screen net top on when I can, but sometimes I do forget. There's also a slew of other pH, ORP, salinity, and leak alarms I'll set up, and even this cool dissolved oxygen module. I will say in most cases this thing is overkill, not needed on a reef tank. However, if you have an aggressive tank with huge expensive fish or an overstocked reef, they can be an awesome tool to turn on a string of air stones in the event of a return pump, skimmer, or other equipment failure, which can impact oxygen levels. So last week we asked all of you how important internet connectivity was with your controller, and over half of you said critical. Also note that 2 weeks ago we asked you what your most desired feature is from a new controller, and notification of pump failure was #1 with outlet-based power consumption coming in second. The new Apex nailed both of these, which is pretty cool. This week we're asking all of you, how happy are you with the new generation of Apex systems? As always, if you learned something new today, let us know with a quick thumbs up and subscribe, because you do not want to miss next week when we get our first hands-on experience with the brand new Vertex Cerebra Aquarium controller.